Hi guys, happy April 1st. It's day 10 online. I know I'm on later than usual, but I've been so busy today. So let's take a look. We've got some important things to come up and we all have problems, right? So here are the you problems. You problem. I need you guys engaging in your section-based Google Classrooms. I had almost everybody in the big giant Google Classroom, and now I'm trying to shift you all into the other one. I need to be sure that you're engaging in tasks on your individual period Google Classroom. So that's your responsibility. All of your teachers will have loaded you up. You just need to sign into Google Classroom, and on your dashboard, you'll see all of your sections from all of your classes, and you should be participating in each and every one. As teachers post assignments in those classrooms, you'll see them on the little widgets on the screen. It'll tell you that if you have an assignment that's due. It doesn't mean that there's nothing for you to do in that classroom. It just means there's something up that's got a deadline. So you should enter the classroom anyway and check it out and see what your teachers need you to get started doing. Part of that is I'm going to ask you to keep in touch with the other kids in the class, right? Kids you're friends with that you're not seeing in Google Classroom, but maybe you're seeing them on TikTok and maybe you know they're on YouTube and maybe you're Snapchatting. Please, please, please tell them they have to get in there. There's a bunch of reasons for this. Actual teaching and schoolwork's going to be starting very soon, and you're getting grades. So you need to get everybody, we want to help each other, right? We want to get everybody engaged and everybody on board. So please make sure you're in your appropriate Google Classrooms. Graphing. We talked about this just before we went out on break and about how we had a problem on the benchmark with the graphing questions. You guys really struggled with those questions, and it was a surprise to me. But we're going to go over those questions today. I'm going to give you a little practice, right? Okay. And finally, grades. What's coming up? How are you going to be graded? What happened? Because I know that the benchmark kind of strained some of you over at the end of the interim third marking period, and you were supposed to have had this time to do what you could to boost that work. So we're going to talk about that today too. My problems, there they go. You know my problems. They have not changed. Meetings, and more meetings. I've been a ton of video meetings in the last few days. So it's kind of how you guys got bumped a little later, and we'll try to get back on track with that as well. All right, let's move on. So I want to talk to you about graphs. We stink. Just kidding. I don't. Sorry, it's April Fool's. I'm not going to play a prank on you, so I at least could take a little dig. I'm just kidding. You don't stink. You smell like banana Laffy Taffy and flowers. Yeah, okay. So let's move on. I want to talk to you specifically about the two graphing questions that we struggled with on the benchmark exam, okay? So here's the first one. Oh, gotta move. Whoa, I'm dizzy now. Okay, so this question was a heart rate question. Wasn't difficult, right? We actually learned how to take our heart rates, and we did experiments where we changed our heart rates, right? You used experimental design to design your own test. You did multiple trials. You found out if your hypotheses were correct. So you're really super familiar with this kind of stuff. Shame on me, because I thought you were familiar on what to look for in graphs so that you could decipher the information correctly. But we really struggled on this one. And the number one thing was actually something I warned you about, and that was being careful to note the increments of measurement on the graph itself, right? We're talking about numerical data. We're talking about numbers. We're big kids now. We don't always count by ones, and it's something you have to pay attention to. Back at the beginning of the year when we did the big head test, remember, I gave you a small piece of graph paper to graph the data on, and we couldn't fit everybody's data on there. So we had to modify, right? Some of you chose to do your bar graphs by 2s, by 3s, by 5s. And I was very specific in telling you to be careful when you read data, someone else's data that you're not familiar with, to be sure that you're counting properly when you read their graph. So when I look at this graph of average heart rate, which is measured in beats per minute, you knew that already, before and after exercise, the first thing that jumps out at me is that there are double bars on this graph, right? It's a double bar graph. So if I go down and I look at the key, I can see that the key tells me that light gray means heart rate before exercise, and dark gray means heart rate after exercise. And I can see right away that the dark gray bars are much taller than the light gray bars, but I knew that already because I know from concrete experience in the science lab that exercise increases heart rate, right? So that makes sense to me. Let's read the graph itself. If I look at the x-axis, down there, I see that it's in trials. Trial 1, Trial 2, and Trial 3. Because we know that good scientists perform multiple trials to make sure their data is logical and their data is acceptable, right? All right. Then if I look at the y-axis, I see that that's where the number's going to go for average heart rate in beats per minute, BPM. Now, if you look here, let me put my pointer on, my laser pointer, right? If I look here at my laser pointer, I see that the graph originally was labeled in increments of 10, 70 through 150, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. And if I look more closely, which I should do because I am a scientist and I'm all about precision and I'm all about noticing details, I see that each section is broken up into 5 equal sized sections, right? And I know if this is 10 and it's divided into 5 equal parts, that each part is worth 2. 70, 72, 74, 76, 78, and 80. So I know now that I should be counting by 2s. We've filled it in on this side to illustrate for today, right? So without looking at anything else or reading any numbers, I should realize how this is set up. I should take the time to kind of get myself in line with what the graph is trying to show me, right? The task was to use the data from the bar graph to complete the data table. Data tables and bar graphs show the exact same data. They just show them in different ways, right? One is written out in an organized fashion. The other one is much more visual. This may, right away from looking at that graph, without even knowing what the numbers are, I know that exercise increases heart rate because the bars after exercise are so much higher than the other ones. That's what bar graphs are good for, right? But sometimes we need to drill down in the data. We need the numbers. So if I look at the data table, I see trial, check, that matches my x-axis. Heart rate before exercise in beats per minute, that matches my light gray bars according to the key. And heart rate after exercise beats per minute, that matches the dark gray taller bars according to the key. All right, so I'm in a space now. I'm in the zone. So now I'm going to look at trial 1. Trial 1's light gray bar, which denotes heart rate before exercise, stops at the first line over the 70. I know each line's worth 2, so I am at 72, 72, 72. And that's what I should have written in that box. If I move over in the row to the second column, the heart rate after exercise in beats per minute, that's the matched dark gray box under trial 2. And if I slide up here, I see it as 2 lines after 120. That's 120, 122, 124. So I should have filled in 72 for trial 1 before exercise and 124 for trial 1 after exercise. For trial 2, I see that the lower bar graph is at 76, 72, 74, 76. And I should have written 76 in the corresponding box. Just like we did in the first trial, I will go up to the second bar in the second trial, and I see it is 2 spaces after 130. That is 132, 134, and the value here should have been 134. Some of you entered odd numbers in some of these boxes, which is technically impossible because when I look at the graph, none of these bars ends in between any of the lines, which is where I would believe an odd number to be. So every answer right out of the gate should have been even. For trial 3, my starting heartbeat was 82 beats per minute, and my after exercise heart rate was 146 beats per minute. 142, 144, 146. And that's how you should have filled in that particular graph. Let's move on. The last graph, the other graph that we struggled with was the line graph. Now, we talked about how line graphs show change over time, which works because when I look at the graph right away, I see the title is change over time. But let me stop for a minute because I am drawn to the visuals because I'm a visual person and a visual learner. I have to be sure to read descriptions, lead-ins, and directions so I get this one right. The directions are what killed you guys on this question. The data table below shows a person's heart rate measured in beats per minute at 5 different times in the beginning of the day. So again, I'm looking at heart rate, and that's fine, but I'm not looking at it before and after activity. I'm looking at it during specific activities in 1 minute time increments to show the change over time. So I look at the first column, and the first column is time. That's great because that's numerical data and I can graph that, right? And the time is 7, 7:01, 7:02, 7:03, and 7:04, right? Someone took 5 minutes worth of heart rates from a subject. If I look at the heart rate column in beats per minute, I notice something right away. I notice that the numbers are increasing. They're going up over time. That gives me a mental clue about what my line graph might look like when it's done. It should probably go up somehow, some way. This does not mean you go to your bar graph and you draw a straight line because you need to plot the points. When I look at the last column, it says activity, and it tells me what the subject was doing at the time that those heart rates were measured. Sleeping, waking up, sitting up in bed, getting out of bed, then walking out of the room. That sounds like the activity, physical activity is increasing over time, which makes sense to me because the heart rate's increasing over time. Now let's go. I know there's a bar graph. I know they're going to tell me to fill it out. I could not read the directions and just start drawing dots because in math we draw dots when we do coordinate points. But I'm going to read the directions. The directions say on the graph use an X to plot the heart rate for each time on the data table. And then this is it. This is what killed you guys. Connect the X's with a line. It's on the directions. It's right there. That's the expectation. A line graph has a line. It shows change over time. It's not enough to plot the points because they could just be freestanding data from God knows what, or a different subject even, right? Because I only have 2 axes in my graph. So connecting the line tells me that this is showing a single subject who is changing over time, whose heart rate is changing over time. So let's look at the graph. 2 things to note. Yes, you are going to do an X on this very first vertical line because that's the line for 7 o'clock in the morning. And if I look closely, I'll see that the horizontal lines actually pass or start before that upright. This tells me this is like a cutout section of a larger grid. And that's okay if you didn't realize that. I am showing you how to think out loud and read these things in more depth. There are no times on tests anymore. So we need to take our time to absorb as much information as we can before we answer questions, right? I see that the x-axis matches the time, 7:01 through 7:04, right? And that there are 5 vertical lines for each one of those minutes. And then when I look at the y-axis, I see that this increases by 5s, right? 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, and that is the heart rate in beats per minute. Awesome. It means I wouldn't be able to numerically graph observational data anyway, right? So I am focused on these 2 columns at this point. This kind of just explains to me why this is happening. So I go to 7 o'clock in the morning. I see that the heart rate is 60, and I will simply draw an X right here in this spot on the intersection between 7 a.m. and 60 because 60 is available on this graph. I will move over to 7:01 and I want to graph at 62. 62 is closer to 60 than 65, so I need that X to be around here somewhere. At 7:02, I am right on 65, so again, I am on an intersection. At 7:03, I am 68, which is a little closer to 70 than 65. So that's where my X should be. And at 7:04, I am directly on 75, again at an intersection. Now, if I connect those lines, if I connect those X's, my line is not straight. My line actually kind of does this. It swoops up. And I can verify that by looking at the numbers. This goes up by 2. This goes up by 3. This goes up by 3. And then this last one goes up by 7. So I'm not going to have a straight line. I'm going to have like this exponential curve. And if you've been watching the news, you've heard about exponential curves because they use that a lot to describe the rate of infection in coronavirus, right? So you would have had to enter those 5 X's and you would have had to connect them with a line. That said, your grades are going in. Do not panic. Let me repeat that. Do not panic, and please encourage your parents not to panic. I've been hearing from your parents. They're worried about your grades. I cannot express enough that you need not to worry right now about this. But here's what I'm going to do for you to make it less of a thing to worry about, okay? My plan, because they want me to end the quarter on the last day that I saw you. And that jams us up because the benchmark just hurt so many of you. And because it was an interim, you may have gotten zeros on some parts of your notebooks or low grades on some parts of your notebooks and not had the time to make anything up. I didn't make you take your notebook home with you. I had hoped we'd be back at school and I didn't want them to get misplaced or destroyed out of the building anywhere, which is why I didn't send you home with them. So that kind of takes away the opportunity for you to work on that and make up work and fix things and get them to me so I can change those grades. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to drop your lowest grade. If it's a 0, it'll go away. If it's a 2 out of 10, it'll go away. My plan is to drop your lowest grade. And then I'm going to go into Google Classroom and I'm going to check our original Google Classroom. And I'm going to check the answers you submitted for the textbook work that I sent you home with on the 13th, because the district has designated that the last day for the quarter. So, case in point, if you did not submit the responses for the questions I gave you in your book, you need to get on the original Google Classroom, and I'll put a reminder and a note up in your individual classrooms. You need to go back and get that assignment and get it done if you didn't already do it, so that I can give you a grade for that. Now, if you are missing so many things that you have like a 12 in my class, I'm probably going to give you a grade of incomplete, which means that I will be reaching out and contacting you personally to talk about what you can do to get some kind of a grade. Okay? So, or else that's going to stick with you because you have a limited amount of time to fix that. And if you don't fix that, you're going to be stuck with the grade. And this is generally those of you that are just don't hand stuff in until the last minute when I come and I go, hey, you have 4 zeros in this class. And then you suddenly magically get everything done in 24 hours and hand it in. This is where that strategy has gotten you, right? An unforeseen emergency has come up. Now you're so far behind and you have very little ways to get things done and handed in. So my advice, the lesson you could take away is do your work when we give it to you. Get it out of the way. You don't need to have it hanging over your head for something you to worry about now, right? So either way, I will do everything I can to work you through this thing with your grades to kind of alleviate some of the stress around the grades, even though you got to believe me when I tell you, try not to stress too much about the grades. All right. So this is what we're going to do. I posted a link in the individual classrooms to go to mathgames.com. And I encouraged you to use your phone to find activities. They have phone icons on some of the activities, but I have since found out that sometimes it sends you to an outside link that wants information from you to do that task. And I don't want you to do that, okay? Because I don't know if there are security issues and I don't want to be responsible for sending you to something that's collecting your data and stuff like that. So I want you to go to a specific activity in mathgames.com, and that is in the graphing section, again, to help you with this. Find the activity 6.93, which is interpreting a bar graph. And you basically can use your phone and like drag bars up and down to match a data table and vice versa. And then I want you to like screenshot it. I'm going to put this up as an assignment, and you can actually go on your phone, do the activity, screenshot it, and then submit it as your work in the assignment. So we're going to try that. Okay. And that's what I have for you for today. I miss you terribly. Please just come on and say hi, but get into those Google Classrooms. All of your teachers have them set up for you. Everybody's waiting for you to show up. You're not in the school building, but technically we're all still at school, right? Technically, we're all still at work. We can't just lose this time, because I told you, time is the one thing you can never get back, right? Once it's wasted, it's wasted. So let's get to work. All right. And I'll see you guys soon.